Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the Matilda Black Prince, the Tier 5 British Medium Premium tank. The tank is available from the tech tree for 1750 gold, or it's available from the gift shop. And like all Tier 5 premium tanks, it quite regularly shows up in special bundles in the gift shop, but it also shows up at up to 50% off in-game. So for about 850 gold, you'll be able to pick this up a couple of times a year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, at 50% off from the tech tree. So the question we're going to be asking today is this tank worth 1750 gold? Now, it should be pointed out that at 1750 gold, the Matilda Black Prince is actually the most expensive Tier 5 premium tank you can buy via the tech tree. For example, the T25 costs 1500 gold, so the Matilda Black Prince is 250 gold more expensive. Likewise, the Chinokai, the Matilda 4. However, it does cost exactly the same as the Ram 2, so both the Matilda Black Prince and the Ram 2 are two of the more expensive Tier 5 premium vehicles. And as per usual, we're going to start with the history of the tank, and the tank doesn't have a lot of history. Only one of these was ever built as an experiment, and it never saw mass production, it never actually saw combat. So basically what this was that it was an experiment with attaching a Cromwell turret. This is the A27 Cromwell turret to the Matilda 4 chassis, and there were problems in development, and basically the turret ring had problems. It had to be reworked, refitted, but basically it was scrapped. So basically this was a prototype. Only one was ever built, and it was scrapped as a failed experiment. Another interesting thing to note about the Matilda Black Prince is that this project of attaching a Cromwell turret to a Matilda chassis didn't actually have a name. So I suppose the correct name for this configuration would be the Matilda A27. The name Matilda Black Prince actually comes from a different project where British scientists rigged up older Matilda tanks to basically work by remote control, drive into certain positions and try to encourage enemy artillery and enemy tanks to open up and reveal their positions. So the Matilda Black Prince name isn't quite accurate when describing this prototype. It was a completely different project. And that's pretty much it for the history. So we're going to be comparing the Matilda Black Prince probably against the closest tank available at Tier 5, which is the Matilda 4, the Russian premium medium tank, another variant of the Matilda. We're also going to be comparing it against the American Ram 2, the German T25 and PC4 Hydrostat, and the Japanese Chinokai. So all the Tier 5 premium medium tanks up here. If we take a look at the hit points, you'll see that the Matilda Black Prince has 610 hit points, which compares very, very favorably against the other more regular medium tanks in the game. Both the Matilda 4, the Ram 2, and the T25 all get 610 hit points as well. Only the two most recent additions to the game, the Hydrostat and the Chinokai, have significantly less. Moving on to weight, you'll see that the Matilda Black Prince comes in at just about 32 tons. Now that does make it the heaviest of all the medium tanks, but not by much. The Matilda 4 and the Ram 2 come in at 31 tons, but the Matilda Black Prince is significantly heavier than the other 3 tanks. However, now it comes to some bad news. Even though it's the heaviest tank, it also has the weakest engine power. It has a pathetic 190 horsepower engine, which is significantly worse than any of the other premium medium tanks in the game. So not only is it the heaviest, it is also got the least engine power, and that gives it a pathetic horsepower to weight ratio of just over 6.2 tons. It is terrible. So it accelerates really, really badly, and the engine power is probably the biggest negative I have about this tank. It is easily one of the slowest, if not the slowest tank in the game, and on top of that, it is definitely the slowest tank in the game when trying to go up hills. In addition to having incredibly bad horsepower to weight ratio and a really, really bad engine, it also has a very, very poor top speed at 22 kilometers an hour. You can see that it is significantly worse than any of the other medium tanks. Now, the Matilda 4 doesn't have great top speed either at 25 kilometers an hour, but it does have a much better horsepower to weight ratio. It does accelerate up to 25 kilometers an hour a lot faster, and even though this is a very, very slow tank, it basically makes the Matilda Black Prince look like a rock. This Matilda Black Prince, it's so slow, it is painful. Now, because the Matilda Black Prince is so slow, I am probably going to be playing a lot of the game footage I'm going to be showing you later in the review at ×2 or maybe even ×4 speed. But just to give you an example of how slow this tank is, we are here on Redshire, and a slow tank gives you a whole set of problems I'm going to be talking about in more detail later on in the review. But I am just accelerating. I'm going to be trying to head into the center of the map, because being a slow tank, if I go down one flank and there aren't enemy tanks there, I've wasted a lot of time. So I'm accelerating! I am doing 24 kilometers an hour down this slope. This is wonderful. But it is quite important, I've found. I get better games if I try to get into a center of the map where my speed doesn't matter so much and I get a good range of fire. So even though I'm going to have to go uphill, unfortunately, that's what I'm going to have to do. So there we go. I've dropped down to 4 kilometers an hour. This thing is terrible on hills. We're going up a slope. We're doing 4 kilometers an hour. We are now slowly accelerating again. I probably shouldn't be hitting trees because I'm stopping dead and it's reducing my speed even more. But traveling in a straight line. And we're doing 10 kilometers an hour. Now, a Tog will accelerate uphill faster than a Matilda Black Prince will. So, miss a shot there, but again, this is real time. You can see how slow this tank is. You can see how much it's struggling to get up these slopes.
Enemy armor is hit.
Keep going, accelerating up a slope. We're doing 6 kilometers an hour, and I'm probably just going to end it there. It is just so difficult to get to the top of a slope. The traverse speed on the Matilda Black Prince is not bad, but it is not spectacular either. It probably fits right in the middle. It's got a very, very similar traverse speed to the Matilda 4. The Ram 2 and Chinokai are slightly better. Only the T25 is worse, and then the Hydrostat has got the best traverse speed. It's not fantastic, but it is okay. Its turret traverse speed is very, very average as well. Similar turret traverse speed to the Matilda 4. The Ram 2 and the Hydrostat have it beaten, but it's better than the T25 or the Chinokai. So again, very, very average. The view range, however, on the Matilda Black Prince is very good at 350 meters. Now, that compares favorably to both the Matilda 4 and the Chinokai, and the other three tanks have significantly worse view range. So, it does have the best view range amongst all the Tier 5 premium tanks. The signal range is also okay. It compares favorably to both the Matilda and the Ram 2. The T25 and the Hydrostat have much better signal range, and the Chinokai has worse. But 570 is not bad. For a medium tank, the Matilda Black Prince has very, very good armor. As expected, it is very, very similar to the Matilda 4. You can see that it has 75mm in front, 70 to the sides, and 55 to the rear. Now, the sides do have a small amount of spaced armor, so it does tend to take a little bit less damage from HE. It's also very, very similar to the Ram 2, but the Ram 2's armor is also slightly sloped, so it's probably a little bit more effective, but it does have much better armor than the three remaining medium tanks. On paper, the turret armor looks okay as well. It may not be as good as maybe the Matilda 4 or the Ram 2, but the turret armor is okay. It has 1mm, well technically it's 1.2mm of extra frontal armor on the turret. However, it has less side and rear armor on the turret than the Matilda or the Ram 2 have. But again, it has significantly better turret armor than most of the other tanks. So we're going to pop into Tank Viewer to take a closer look at the armor profile, and the first thing you'll notice is this tank has a lot of spaced armor. So let's turn that off for a moment, and we'll take a look on paper. it has 78mm at the front on the hull, but you'll see that only refers to one narrow strip between the upper and lower glacis. 76.2 is the frontal turret armor and the turret ring, but again, it's only 1.2mm thicker than the regular Matilda. 75mm is the more regular frontal armor. You can see that quite a lot of the front is 75. 70 refers to the wings, which are angled and will actually get more bounces. 63.5 refers to the side of the turret. A lot of tanks will be able to pen you in the side of the turret, and if you do come up against a Matilda Black Prince, to avoid all that spaced armor, probably one of the safest places to shoot it is the side of the turret or the rear of the turret, which only has 57.2mm of armor. Again, if you've gotten to the rear of a Matilda Black Prince, you might be better off going for the base, which is only 55mm thick. 47mm refers to the upper glacis, but again, that's angled, and the lower glacis, which is angled. And the sides of the tank are only 40mm thick, but the sides are not as easy to pen as you think, again because of this spaced armor. And the tank has a lot of spaced armor. The gun mantlet is extremely troll. It's got 76.2mm of spaced armor around the gun, so you really don't want to be shooting here on a Matilda Black Prince. 25mm of spaced armor refer to the tracks, and you can see that the turret ring is also hidden by spaced armor. So splash damage from HE does do a little bit less damage to this tank, and it does have spaced armor on the sides. It even has more spaced armor behind the tracks. You've got a narrow strip of 13mm of spaced armor behind the tracks before you get to that 40mm of hull armor. So the armor can be very troll on the tank, but it either works or it doesn't. I'm going to be showing you an example in a couple of moments of where the armor works, but here is another example of where it doesn't. So I'm here on Malinovka, and I've cut to where I've gotten into this bush because it probably took me almost a minute to reach this bush from spawn. And our team are being very aggressive down the other flank, so I decide, you know what, I'm not spotting anything anymore, let's push up. And we'll move into this bush. Oh no, I've just been spotted, so we bounced the M7, we've bounced the Churchill, M7's able to put a shot in. I'm angled against these tanks, but Churchill has no problems penning me. KV-1 has just bounced. I've taken another hit from the Matilda, M7 has bounced, Churchill has penned me, and the KV-1 finishes me off. Right, well, I took 10 hits there. I bounced 5, and I basically got penned by 5. Sometimes the armor works, and sometimes it doesn't. Now, what you've got to remember is that this is a medium tank, and this armor profile is pretty much similar to a lot of tier 5 heavies. So the armor is very good. However, it can be troll. Like so much about this tank, it is situational. In some situations, your armor will work and you will end up bouncing a lot of shots, and then for absolutely no reason in the very next game, everything that shoots you will tend to pen and kill you rather quickly. So while you do have armor, once again, don't count on it. A lot of tanks will have absolutely no problems penning you. So let's take a look at this gun, which is a 6-pounder or a 57mm. It has a absolutely phenomenal rate of fire, but like so much about this tank, the gun is situational, and there's always going to be howevers. And the first however is it has a phenomenal rate of fire, 26.09, which means that you are going to be firing out roughly about 30 shots a minute. That is absolutely insane. It really has a beautiful rate of fire, and you can take down enemy tanks so quickly with this rate of fire. But the however is you only have 55 rounds of ammunition. Now, that means you can pretty much run out of ammunition in about 2 minutes of constantly firing this gun. So you've got to be a lot more careful. You get suckered into firing a lot of shots and spamming a lot of shots because of that amazing rate of fire. So basically you will find yourself running out of ammunition if you're not careful. The rate of fire is fantastic, but you really do have to conserve your ammunition and basically only take shots that you know have a very, very good chance of hitting. You can't afford to waste shots with this gun. The penetration is another very, very nice thing about the gun. It has 110 millimeters of penetration with the standard AP and an amazing 180 millimeters of penetration with the APC or the premium ammunition. Again, there's a however. This 110 millimeters of penetration is very, very nice. It will penetrate most tanks you're going to be coming up against in the Black Prince. However, you are going to have to know about weak spots, because there are going to be tanks you're going to have problems penning, and you are going to have to be able to aim at weak spots in order to make this AP work. But the AP ammo on the tank is very good, and it does make it actually probably a better money maker than the Matilda 4 is for the Russians, because of that extra 20 millimeters of penetration. The APC or the premium ammo has a very nice 180 millimeters of penetration, which is fantastic on paper. But again, there's an however. The however for the APC or is it drops its penetration at distance very, very quickly. So if you're going to be shooting at targets at maybe 100 or 350, 400 meters away, that 180 millimeters is going to be more like 120 millimeters of penetration. So even the APC or is not fantastic. It is situational, and is really better used up close and personal and not so much at distance. The average damage on the gun doesn't look good. The alpha damage is only 75 hit points, but when you've got a rate of fire of almost a shot every 2 seconds, that 75 damage runs up really, really quickly, and you can surprise tanks and tear them apart if they don't know how deadly this gun can be. The accuracy is not fantastic at .41, so yes, while you can use this gun as a sniper, you can actually hit targets at long distance. The however is the accuracy is not fantastic, and really you don't have the ammunition to be sniping at targets at distance, especially if you're not going to have any guarantee of hitting them. The aim time, however, is the weakest part of this gun. Yes, it's another however. 2.3 aim time is not fantastic. In fact, it's very, very average, and while it can work on some tanks, unfortunately it doesn't work on the Matilda Black Prince due to the fact your rate of fire is so quick. Essentially, it means that your gun is going to reload before you can actually aim it, and when you have a reloaded gun, it is so tempting just to keep spamming shots, but the fact is you're not going to be aimed fully on every shot that's reloaded, so you end up missing a lot of shots due to the fact you're spamming shots so quickly and you're not giving the gun the time to aim. It is a very, very big negative for this tank, again because you have so little ammunition and you really can't afford to miss shots. Another hidden stat for the gun on the Matilda Black Prince is its amazing gun depression. Yes, this tank has something that is very, very special. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Matilda Black Prince has an amazing gun depression of 13 degrees. Now that is, I can't think of a single tank in the game that has more gun depression than that. But 13 degrees of gun depression means that the Matilda Black Prince is very, very effective at fighting on slopes, using terrain to its advantage, using rises in the ground, and being able to put that 13 degrees of gun depression to use. I find I get a lot of good games from the Matilda Black Prince when I'm able to get it into a position where I can use a slight rise in the ground or a hill to my advantage. But as I pointed out earlier in the video, there's another however, and that however is the Matilda is incredibly bad at going uphill. It is incredibly bad at climbing, and yeah, it does take you a while to get to the top of that rise, but when you do get there, you're going to have fun with the gun depression on the tank. So let's see this gun, this armor, and this engine power. Well, I don't know whether you could call it engine power. It has an engine, I suppose. Let's see it in action. We are here on Mountain Pass. I am platooned with Neon Travels and Cursed Reversed, and we are just going to go. And as you can see, we have incredibly poor acceleration. But thankfully, I have a platoon mate Cursed reversed in his T14, and he knows how painfully slow this tank is, so he's going to help me get into position. So I'm doing 24 kilometers an hour, 25 kilometers an hour. I'm in danger of getting a nosebleed. It's nice to have a platoon mate when you're in your Matilda Black Prince. I can really recommend it. It bypasses how poor this engine can be. So I'm trying to get into the center of the map where I can actually put my gun to use and not have to worry about my speed so much. And now that I'm not getting a push anymore, I've slowed back down to about 18 kilometers an hour. So Cursed Reversed continues to advance. I'm aiming, and as you can see, quite a long aim time. Get one shot in, set the PC4NH, and I missed that shot because I fired before being fully aimed. I missed that shot because I fired before being fully aimed, and someone else nicks the kill. You can see that I'm trying to give the gun as much time as possible to aim, but it is just so difficult when you have a loaded gun and you want to get another shot in and you just can't do it. So I'm trying to adjust. I've seen tanks, they're on the minimap, they've come across the bridge, and I'm trying to move to intercept them, and you can just see how slowly this tank can react to the changing situation on the battlefield. So I was hoping he was going to advance, but that's not going to happen. So now I've suddenly realized that we've got no tanks. All our tanks have turned around to deal with the threat in the middle of the map, and now we have no tanks heading down the J line. So I bounce the T70, get one shot in, and again I'm just using regular AP here. And I know that I'm safe on my right-hand side because our tanks have advanced to the right-hand side. And this tank is fantastic at firing on the move. I forgot to mention that. Sorry, that was a little bit of lag there, but I killed the M3 Stewart with 2 shots on the move. Because the tank is so slow, you can fire it on the move very well. But I've bounced 15 shots, including the shot from the KV-1, and I have more than enough penetration with my standard AP to pen his turret. So I'm going to try and do some side scraping here.
Enemy armor is damaged.
And get another shot into the T-70. But I'm pretty much the only tank for the moment holding back whatever tanks are ahead of me here. And I notice that the Martyr 2 has moved down to the right, so there's only a KV-1 here, along with the T-70 who's trying to flank me. So I track the KV-1, looking for damage, looking for somewhere I can pen him. He's at an angle, and I'm having problems penning him, so I'm tracking him, going for a shot at his lower glacis, and we take him out eventually. But I've taken 16 hits and only one shot has actually penned me. But now there are only 2 enemy tanks left, and again we've got this problem with the engine power. So at the end of games you cannot clean up simply due to the fact you are not quick enough. So I'm on ×4, but I'm only doing about 18 kilometers an hour along here. There's no way I'm going to get back in time to deal with the remaining enemy tanks. And we cap out. So basically, the gun is fantastic. The gun is very good, but you do have to be aware. Even though I'm used to driving the Black Prince now, I was still firing a lot of shots in that game where I was firing as soon as I was reloaded and not fully aimed, and it caused me to miss a lot of shots at the beginning of the game, and it cost me damage in the long term. You got to see the armor at work. I managed to bounce 16 shots, only one of them penned and actually did damage, but it works extremely well against lower tier tanks. As I gave in an example earlier on, when you're up against similar tier or higher tier tanks, the armor really isn't that good. So while it is armored, you can't really count on the armor. And of course the engine is terrible, and that's another example of how the engine can hurt you. You just don't have the speed to clean up at the end of games. So not only is the Matilda Black Prince frustrating when you're trying to get into position at the beginning of games and the engine's not powerful enough, and as you saw, it's frustrating at the end of games when the engine's not powerful enough to clean up at the end of games. It's also a frustrating tank to play when your team are just too good. Look at me struggling up the hill on Himmelsdorf. Let's move this up to ×4 or maybe even ×8. So my team are way too good. I've just reached the top of the hill, but my team are advancing, and I just don't have the speed. Hey, I did some damage, but my team are way too aggressive. My team are way too good, and the entire game passes me by before I can pretty much do anything in this game. I eventually make it to cap long after the rest of my team and do manage to get a couple of kills, but it is extremely frustrating when your team is too good. And the Matilda Black Prince can be an extremely frustrating tank to play when your team is bad. So I'm advancing, let's speed it up a little bit. I'm just advancing straight up to the middle of the map. And again, I'm hoping to do some work here. But my team are already down 3 tanks. So I've finally made it into position and my team are down by 5 tanks. And I've only just arrived into position. So all I can do is deal with the tanks that are here. And my team are collapsing. The game is only 3.5 minutes old and there are only 7 tanks left on my team. So I'm doing work here. I'm dealing with the tanks that have come to this side of the map. But yeah, we're down to 5 tanks. And we're down to 4 tanks, and yeah, it's just, I got into position, fired a few shots, but when your team is bad, the Matilda Black Prince is an extremely frustrating tank to play as well. So, it's a frustrating tank when you're trying to get into position. It's a frustrating tank when you're trying to wrap up at the end of games. It's a frustrating tank when your team are just too good. And it's a frustrating tank when your team isn't very good. But it also can't react to what's happening on the battlefield. Again, down to that slow speed. I've just gotten into position. I'm doing work here. I'm dealing with these tanks in front of me. And if you look behind us on the minimap, 3 enemy tanks have just driven into our spawn. We're winning this game. And I am just way too slow to get back. The enemy team have capped out. We were actually winning that game. Game is only a couple of minutes old. I've been doing my work and I was the only tank to turn around, but because the enemy team decided to cap, even though I was only 300 meters from our cap, I simply wasn't able to get back in time. Another frustrating experience in the Matilda Black Prince. So I think you're getting the message by now. The Matilda Black Prince is a very frustrating tank to play. In this scenario, I was planning to go down the 1-2 lines because basically, yeah, I was hoping to encounter enemy tanks, but then I realized it's an encounter game and our entire team are going to be heading down the 1-2 lines. They're either camping spawn or on the 1-2 lines, so I decide, oh bloody hell, I am going to have to go and I'm going to have to go towards cap. Enemy team are capping already, and this tank is just too slow to react. So we do get to the rear of a Churchill. You can see the rate of fire here. I managed to do 322 damage to that Churchill 3, but this tank is just too slow. The rest of our team have finally realized that the enemy are capping. They all charge towards cap from the 1-2 lines, and I'm still trying to get over to cap. So yeah, okay, rather than following them, let's just go straight across the middle of the map, but I'm still way too slow. I'm taking whatever opportunities I can to take shots, but this entire game has passed me by, simply because at the beginning of the game I decided to go one way, realized my team completely ignored one flank, turned around, and the tank was just too slow to recover. I ended up having a bad game simply because I decided to try and help the team and cover the flank. No one went down. So basically, Matilda Black Prince, I have probably another dozen or so examples of how frustrating this tank can be to play, but I hope These few examples basically illustrate what I'm trying to say. It's slow and it can be frustrating in so many different ways and so many different scenarios. So let's take a look at the crew. Is the Matilda Black Prince a decent crew trainer? And you can see I've got my Centurion 7-1 crew in here. Still training up a new crew for the Centurion 7-1, and it fits into the Matilda Black Prince perfectly. So again, on paper you would think this would be a very, very good crew trainer, but like everything else with the Matilda Black Prince, there's an however. The however for the Matilda Black Prince is that it is a very, very good crew trainer when it comes to tier 8 and above. So it has a perfect crew configuration. For example, the Centurion at tier 8, the Centurion 7-1 at tier 9, and for example the FV4202 at tier 10. It is a really, really good crew trainer for the last 3 tanks in the British medium tank line. However, when it comes down to tanks like the Comet and the Cromwell, you'll see that these tanks have a radio operator. So as far as crew training goes, it's okay. It's a very, very good crew trainer if you're focused on the higher tier British tanks, and it's an okay crew trainer if you're focused on the mid-tier British medium tanks, because you do need an extra radio operator. And once again, there's an however. The however is that in future patches, Wargaming are going to be removing the FV4202 as a tier 10 medium tank, and they are going to be reworking it as a brand new tier 8 British medium premium tank. So the British are going to be getting another premium medium tank, which can be used as a crew trainer, but at the moment the Matilda Black Prince is the only tank available to train up British medium crews, so there's not a lot of choice. But as I say, in the future there will be a new tier 8 premium medium tank added to the game. So if you are serious about training up medium crews, you are going to have more choices in future. So let's talk about equipment, and there are a lot of viable equipment choices, and once again, this is just my opinion. You may decide to fit the tank differently. It is completely up to your playstyle. I just tell you what tends to work for me. A toolbox is a very, very viable equipment choice for this tank. If you have a spare toolbox and if you have a spare equipment slot, a toolbox is not a bad choice, because the tank is very, very slow, and getting tracked just makes it even slower. RT does love to target you in the Matilda Black Prince, unfortunately, and you're just not quick enough to avoid it. So a toolbox would help out on this tank and get those tracks up a fraction quicker. An enhanced gun laying drive is another very, very viable choice for this tank, because the aim time is so much slower than the rate of fire. However, I decided not to go for it, but again, it's one of those choices I always wonder about. Maybe I should take off something like the gun rammer, and maybe I should put on the gun laying drive instead, because even without a gun rammer, the rate of fire on this tank is insane. But completely up to you. Coated optics is another viable choice, because you've got fairly decent view range on the tank already at 350 meters. Coated optics is a viable choice because you basically tend to constantly try and stay on the move to keep up with the speed of a battle, and yeah, again, it's completely up to you. I went for binocs over coated optics, however. Basically, I didn't want to spend 500,000 credits on a Matilda Black Prince simply to put coated optics on, so I ended up going for the binocs instead. As I say, coated optics are a viable choice, but I found that the binocs are not that bad an equipment choice for the tank, because what happens quite frequently is, if your team are very, very poor, they die very, very quickly, and you're left in a position where you're basically defending an enemy flank, and in those situations the binocs are probably better than coated optics. Again, it's completely up to your playstyle. Now, the medium caliber gun rammer is something I went for because the DPM and the rate of fire on this tank is insane, and to be perfectly honest, I probably should take this off and replace it with the enhanced gun laying drive, because that just makes my rate of fire even faster, and my aim time even slower. So basically, yeah, I think this is maybe a bad equipment choice for me. I probably should replace it with an enhanced gun laying drive because the DPM on the tank is insane, even without it being 10% better. However, I do like the extra DPM, and I do like being able to get close and personal to enemy tanks, and it doesn't happen very often. So again, maybe I made a bad equipment choice here, and the gun laying drive would be a better choice, but once again, up to you. Medium spall liner is another viable piece of equipment. A lot of tanks are going to be firing HE at you, and RT loves to target you. So again, medium spall liner is a viable piece of equipment, and if I really wanted to and spend some more gold on this tank, I probably would remove the gun rammer and maybe put the spall liner on, or the enhanced gun laying drive and a spall liner. But again, choice is up to you. Enhanced suspension, again, I don't think it's worth it for this tank. Not worth spending that sort of money on the tank. You do get tracked quite often, and RT will keep you perma-tracked, but I don't think the enhanced suspension is going to help you that much in that situation. Wet ammo rack, I don't remember being ammo racked in this tank, and I don't think I'll get ammo racked enough to warrant a wet ammo rack. Improved vents, again, I try and put it on most of my tanks, but once again, there are a lot of viable choices for this tank, so maybe you might choose to remove improved vents and maybe put on a gun laying drive or spall liner instead. It is up to you. A camo net is another viable choice because the tank is so slow. You might choose to go for camo net and binocs and basically use this thing very passively and as a sniper. I have seen a lot of people use the Black Prince to that effect. Play it as a sniper, play it very passively, simply because you just don't have the speed to be able to play this tank like a medium tank. So the Matilda Black Prince is kind of a strange machine. You've got to pretty much decide how you're going to play it very early on with your equipment choices. You can choose, as I say, to play it passively, maybe use a camo net and binocs and use it as a sniper. You can maybe try and use it as an insane DPM machine like I have and put a gun rammer on it with vents and try, and I do mean try, to get to the front line and be able to put this amazing gun into action. There are benefits to using the tank in both scenarios. By playing it passively, the speed is not as big an issue for you, but by playing it aggressively and trying to get to that front line, it means that the accuracy and aim time on the gun don't matter so much if you're pumping shots into enemy tanks at very close ranges. But once again, it is completely up to you. I'm just telling you what works for me. Okay folks, it is time for the overview game, a game where I show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. And I am bottom tier in a tier 6 game. Now I forgot to mention before now that the Matilda Black Prince gets special matchmaking, so the highest tiers it will ever see is tier 6. I am platooned with Beyond D, also in a Matilda Black Prince, and Bringy, who is in his KV-220. So all three tanks get special matchmaking, and we are bottom tier. We are here on Prokhorovka, and I am advancing straight up the middle of the map because, as I say, the Matilda Black Prince has fantastic gun depression, and I want to get into a position where the speed doesn't really hurt me that much, and I can actually shoot and support as many flanks as I can at one time. Now, Beyond is going to be running down the other flank. Bringy is going to be working the 1-2 lines in his KV-220. And I really don't want to get spotted by that Cromwell who's patrolling the middle of the map. There are 2 RT on the enemy team. They are quite rapid firing, and I really don't want to get targeted by RT. Again, it's happened to me so many times, but you can see how slow the tank is. This whole replay is going to be on normal speed, but you can see how slow the tank is to get into position, how slow it is to try and relocate. And yes, there we go. I have been spotted, and believe it or not, RT is going for me. Thankfully, RT does miss. But I'm doing a whole 5 kilometers an hour up this rise, trying to get into a position to get shots. But you can see the amazing gun depression on the tank. But it is just painfully slow. I really don't have a lot of fun playing the Matilda Black Prince, and as I say, I can remember having great games in this tank, but they happen so infrequently, they are so rare, that you end up having 3 or 4 incredibly frustrating games in this tank for every one good game you have. So I'm trying to use the Rise, I'm trying to use my gun depression. And we are losing tanks. Unfortunately, I can't pen the KV-2 who's directly ahead of me, but I know he spotted me, and I do not want RT focused on me. So KV-2 fires and he misses. Beyond D dies to a Hellcat. And the KV-2 is not using the derp gun, so look at this rate of fire. No problems penning the side of this KV-2. Trying to set him on fire. Look at how quickly I'm able to fire and do damage. Now he gets away, he survives, but in that very, very quick exchange I did 463 damage to that KV-2. Now while this may not be the best Black Prince replay I have, if you check back further on the channel, you'll find a Matilda Black Prince Ace Tanker where I do 2.4k damage. That probably gives a much, much better demonstration of the gun. But this is just a good overall view of the tank. And you can see that I can snipe with it. And if I let the gun aim, if I let the gun settle down between shots, it is accurate enough to be able to take out that Hellcat at distance. So I'm blind firing this ELC, no idea whether or not I hit him. But now I'm pushing forward. Oh, and T1 heavy on the hill. So 2.3 aim time is not bad on most tanks, but on this tank it is terrible. Ugh, terrible shot by me. And it's terrible down to that high rate of fire. Look how quickly I reload compared to how slowly it takes the aim circle to die down. Now you can snipe with this gun. Don't know where that shot went. We finally get a shot into the Hellcat. And there we go. Two more shots into the Hellcat. Now the ELC has lost a little bit of health, so it's possible my blind shots did actually hit him. But I'm trying to aim. Now, it's not a sniper. You can snipe with this tank, but it is definitely not a sniper. But it's still a very close game. The score is 10-9. And I'm using the gun from distance. I am bottom tier, remember. I'm using the gun depression as much as I can. And now I make a big mistake. Well, pretty soon. Still trying to go for this ELC, hit for no damage. I'm rushing these shots before being fully aimed, and as a result my shots are going everywhere. And I want to kill this guy, finally hit him and track him, get another shot in. Get another shot in, let's kill him. There we go, there's kill number 2. I'm up to 1136 damage, but here's where I make my mistake. See, I go down this side of the railway lines because, okay, RT nearly missed me, but because I saw the VK come down here, and I didn't realize that the VK had been killed. And because I came down this side of the railway lines, I now don't have shots on enemy RT. And the tank is way too slow to actually turn around and go back the other way. So I've got no choice but to advance. Now, if I'd stayed on the other side of the railway tracks, I would have been able to get shots at that Jagdpanzer, I would have been able to get shots at RT, but again, this one simple mistake cost me a lot of damage and possibly a few kills. And that's one of the reasons I decided to include this as an overview game. You've got to really think well in advance of what you're going to do. A simple mistake in this tank, because it's so slow, is going to cost you damage, and it is going to cost you kills. But overall, it was an okay game. I ended up doing 1200 damage, so a couple of my blind shots did go in, and I did finish top on XP for my team. So guys, time to sum up. Is the Matilda Black Prince worth it? Well, it has a lot of hit points, which is very, very nice, but as pointed out continuously in this video and in the clips I've shown you, the engine power, the weight, and the speed limit are incredibly crippling and makes the tank not very enjoyable to play. I'm not saying you can't have good games in the Matilda Black Prince, but what I found when I was going through the review and trying to gather footage is I looked back over about 20 games I played in the Matilda Black Prince. Yes, I did have a few games, a few good games in there, but the majority of the games were very, very, very frustrating. Getting spotted and killed before being able to get into position. Getting into a position and then having my armor not work, and every single tank shooting at me seemed to be able to pen me. That was frustrating as well. Games where I just was not quick enough to keep up with a very, very aggressive team, and all the enemy were dead before I could get there. Games where my team were very, very bad, and basically I ended up standing alone against multiple enemy tanks simply because I was not fast enough to get into position and my team died before I could get there. Games where I chose to go down one flank and the enemy team went up the other flank and I had a terrible game as a result. I mean, the examples just go on and on and on, and it was quite painful looking through all of those replays and going, you know what? Even though you can have amazing games in this tank, and players do have really, really good games in Matilda Black Prince, but for every really, really good game I had, I probably had 3 or 4 really, really bad ones. And I think that pretty much sums up my view of the tank. I did actually go into this review with a more favorable view because I could remember those really, really good games, but when I put it into context and looked through all the really, really bad games, it brought home to me the fact that just how frustrating this tank can be to play. But I will say it does have nice hit points. For a medium tank, the armor is very, very good, but once again, situational. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The traverse speed and turret traverse speed are okay, nothing special. The view range is good, the signal range is okay, and like so much about the Matilda Black Prince, the gun has good points and it has bad points. It has a fantastic 13 degrees of gun depression and a really, really nice penetration on its AP ammo. In fact, you don't have to fire very much gold in this tank at all. However, the gun is not accurate, and even though it's rapid firing, the aim time does not match the rate of fire, which means that you tend to miss a lot of shots due to the fact you're not fully aimed before firing, and you don't have a lot of ammunition. You can run out of ammunition very, very quickly in this tank. In addition, the gold ammo, the premium ammo for the gun, has 180 millimeters of penetration, which is fantastic, but it only has 180 millimeters of penetration at close range. If you're going to be sniping, if you're going to be firing gold ammo at distance, unfortunately, the penetration does drop off and ends up not being that much better than the AP. So you really do need to get up close and personal in this tank in order to put the gun to its best effect and be able to hit weak spots. But at the same time, being able to get up close and personal is frustrating because of that slow engine speed. However, because the standard AP on the gun is very, very good, you don't have to fire that much premium ammo, and as a result, this tank will actually make you money. It's a decent crew trainer for the later tier British medium tanks, but maybe not as much for the mid tier because you are missing a radio operator, and this tank does get special matchmaking, so it will only see tier 6 maximum. And for some unknown reason, this tank costs more gold than most of the other tier 5 premium medium tanks. Really, I don't understand that decision by Wargaming, because the tank, to be honest, is just bad. You can have great games in it, but it is just a bad tank. It's not a very fun tank to play. You can have great moments in it, but they just don't happen often enough. So I really don't understand why it's more expensive. But it does appear on special every now and again, and you will pick it up for half the gold price. If you're a tank collector, you're going to own this tank or want to pick it up anyway, but Even at half gold price, even at about 850 gold, is the tank worth it? I don't think so. I really don't think so, folks. Especially with Wargaming announcing that they're going to be introducing the FV4202 as a new Tier 8 premium British tank. But if you're going to be training up British medium crews, I would probably save my gold for that particular tank, because it could not be worse than the Matilda Black Prince. You can have great games in this. I know some of you guys out there probably love your Matilda Black Princes, but for a new player, or even for an experienced player, this is a very frustrating tank to play, and I really can't recommend it. Sorry folks, Matilda Black Prince, just not worth it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.